from the GEO. Dan, are you there?
I'm here. Thanks. Good afternoon, everyone.
So did you email information?
I did. Much of it was just a summary document of what was provided last week, but I'll share my screen just to go through it quickly and highlight new information if that's helpful.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm assuming you can see this. Again, this was a summary of what was provided, I guess, earlier this week. So I will just highlight the new information. So this is the solar currently operational in Maine.
And this is level 4?
This is all solar.
All solar.
All solar installed in Maine per the numbers that we have. So 91 megawatts. I've seen numbers that are a little bit closer to 100. This is as of February, so there may be a little bit more. 78 of this is enrolled in net energy billing programs. But you can see there's been not a significant uptick. This is 15 megawatts installed last year, 4 megawatts this year. Included in this number, there's the Chimbro project in Pittsfield, which is 9 to 10 megawatts, a Madison project in Kennebunk. And we update this number monthly. So still not, a significant amount installed, at least under net energy billing.
And those projects you mentioned they are grid scale, correct?
The 9 to 10 megawatt in Chimbro, I think you'd consider that grid scale or approaching that. And the Madison project is smaller than that. I can't recall the exact size of that, but they are they're bigger than what you'd consider rooftop.
And they're bigger. Are they net energy billing projects?
No.
Okay.
So only
they're bigger than 5.
Right. Or just in at their own consumer-owned utility, installed at their own COU.
Okay. Good. Thank you.
The next, I'm not sure we need to rehash this, but just was a summary of what was in our RPS report, which we went through last time. Wanted to make sure that was in one place for the group, just a chart of what the scenario analysis showed. And then, again, this is just technical information about where we got the level 4 interconnection data. I think last time we reported there was about 2,200 megawatts installed. I mean, in the interconnection queue. We went and took another look at that, and the way we see it is there's about 2,400 megawatts in the interconnection queue. I think the PUC and GEO have a little bit of different numbers by 100 or 200 megawatts or so. Just to explain what I think is the difference is there's some pretty big projects in the interconnection queue that are listed greater than 5 megawatts, and what we did in our analysis was cut those off at 5 megawatts. So someone might put a 10 megawatt number in the queue, but NEB is not open to them at 10 megawatts. So we just reduced that to 5. There's also a couple of standalone battery storage projects in the interconnection queue, and we did not include those in our numbers. So that may be the difference. And I think, I don't want to speak for Chair Bartlett, but I'm sure we can go back and reconcile both of our numbers just to make sure we're all on the same page. But 2,400-ish megawatts in the queue. And
that's all at level 4?
That is the only, to my understanding, I know CMP and Burson might, or the commission might have other information. That is the only information that I think we have available of an interconnection queue.
Okay.
This is just the same information broken out by utility and interconnection dates. You can see from 2019 to 2021 in CMP's queue of 1,800, 1,900 megawatts.
Okay.
And then the same for Versant interconnection queues. Again, we went through this roughly last time. And then what has a net energy billing agreement by utility. So 90 megawatts 18 megawatts per utility, but then there's a lot in the NEB agreement, but not operational for each of the utilities.
Okay.
One thing a little bit new that we didn't provide last time was when a solar facility gets into the queue, they indicate what program they want to participate in. And if folks recall, there's really two net energy billing programs that you can participate in: the credit program, or the KWH program, where you are crediting an account for those through net energy billing, or the tariff program, where you're receiving cash payments. And what you can see is what's in the net energy billing queue. Yellow is the kind of kilowatt hour crediting program, and then green is the tariff program. So we broke it out by kind of what program was being selected.
Okay, great.
Which is not necessarily surprising, because in order to get an NEB agreement, you either have to have your ISA or you have to have 90% of your offtake agreement. And I think it's fair to say that these kind of tariff programs may be a little bit easier to get the offtake agreement for. Oftentimes just a few customers, the way I understand it, as opposed to, if you're doing a large community solar project with hundreds of individuals, that's going to take more time. Okay. We were asked, and this is just about the end, we were asked to look at attrition rates. We've been, of what's in the queue and what could fall out of the queue. I think what we found is it's really difficult to look at other programs from other states and have it be apples to apples, just given all programs are different and all systems are different. And so these are some of the characteristics or reasonings of why, what could really change the factors of an attrition rate. Though we did want to point out that in the PUC proceeding, looking at this, and I really want to speak for others, I'm just kind of summarizing what MREA and others in the solar industry and CMP and Versant commented on, was that some programs in Massachusetts and Minnesota have seen attrition rates of 40 to 60%. But that, I think that there was some feeling that it would, again, vary by where the project is, and kind of how long where they are in the queue on the substation, and kind of some of those factors. So it was difficult to kind of provide this is what we should expect, but I think there are some examples from other states that others that are active in other markets could highlight. We, again, for just a reminder, in our RPS study assumed a 50% attrition rate, and picked 500 megawatts as a baseline to be built. And then I noted at the end that ISO New England, which is dealing typically with these larger projects in their interconnection queues, estimates a much higher attrition rate. But I think that's apples to oranges, where those are kind of larger projects that are getting in the queue as to these distributed level projects, but did want to provide that information. So I think that is again, mostly a summary of what we provided before. Wanted to make sure that it was in one document, but then tried to provide a little bit of additional information where possible.
Okay, good. And then Phil, are you on the line? Great, we're not able to, are you unmuted?
There you go. I was on my phone, so I unmuted one, but not the other.
That's okay. So, Phil, and we had asked you for a variety of information, and so why don't you go over what you have for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first question that had come up was that I think Representative Krahowski was asking about the growth in the queue from when we did our report last fall to where it is today. So we just pulled up those numbers for you, both for CMP and Versant, and you can see that there's really tremendous growth between that time period. In the last couple of months, there's been less added, and we don't know whether that is a trend or that is, or whether we'll pick up again, but wanted to provide that information.
And that number, the total for March 2021 of 2628, that's that compared to the figure that Dan had of 2,400, and he said you were about a couple hundred off.
Yeah, and so what I'm clear of whether it's the issues he's raised or purely just timing when we pulled the numbers, or whether it is a few projects have dropped off,
Okay.
withdrawn. But
Good. And I do want to remind everybody on that we are live streaming for this, just in case you want to know.
Great. And then I just, again, put in the chart we had before, which sort of broke down the projects by their status to get to that 2628 number. One of the other discussion points that was raised and we were asked about is what kind of milestones might you all want to consider in the context of a megawatt cap, if you're trying to sort of provide some additional winnowing beyond the mere execution of an NEB agreement. And so we just wanted to toss out some of the thinking that we've had around various milestones that you might consider, or if you charged us with doing it. These are the types of things we would start with to start thinking about. Things like site control. Have all the permits been received? Is the financing in place? Have the equipment been ordered? Has the EPC contractor been selected? The person who's actually going to be doing a lot of the work on the ground and the engineering work. Has obviously ground been broken? Has construction started? And obviously at the very end of that tail is if when the facility is in service and fully operational, and of course those would be protected. Next, we just pulled the information that I think ended up coming out in the context of our discussion, but just wanted to put it here as well from our Rule 324 of what the different size projects are for the different levels, and also direct you to places in the rule that might have some of the screening criteria if you're interested in digging into that further. I would note that the levels we're currently have a proceeding open on we currently have a proceeding open on the level 2 project, so it's possible that that number could change. But as of the way the rule stands right now, it's 2 megawatts.
Okay.
And the level 1 are just the small rooftop type projects.
So level 3 that says, and you have to take this slow with me like I'm in 3rd grade. So level 3 would be 10 megawatts. So you're including net energy billing and non-net energy billing projects, but they're non-exporting. So that's where, let's say, Bath Iron Works wants to put in a project and they're going to consume all the energy themselves.
That's right.
Okay. And then level 4 is all other small generators and those that fall those that fail the screens of 1 to 3.
That's
so
right. There's a set of criteria you go through. So the reality is that a 2 megawatt project, if it failed certain screens, could end up under level 4 review. So it's not quite as clean a line as saying 2 to 5 megawatts, but it is either greater than 2 megawatts or it has failed one of the earlier screens.
So let's say I have a 7 megawatt proposal, which is outside of net energy billing. I'm not going to be in 1. I'm not going to be in 2. It's not something I'm just going to use for myself. So that would end up in 4. Is that correct?
That's why I believe so, yes.
So that's not something that net energy billing applies to, but appears in those 2400 or 2600 numbers.
Well, I'd have to, that's what I need to check with. Dan raised that as a potential issue, but I will need to check with my team to put those numbers together to see if they captured anything greater than 5 megawatts or not.
And that's kind of a refinement I think I'd like to see. I don't know if Steve, you have anything you want to see?
Yes. Yep. I also have a question, if I could, Chair Bartlett. When my recollection is, and I think it was 1711, we went from I think it was 600 and something kW up to, initially it was a small jump in the original bill, and then I think we ended up at 5 megawatts. I'm wondering if you know that that 600 plus kW, which is obviously quite a bit larger than 25 kW you just mentioned as like your rooftop, what kind of a project that might have been? You know, in other words, what was the reason it was at that level in the first place? if you know.
Yeah, and I'm no expert here, but I think that would be for like businesses. You might have a situation of, you know, a big box store or something that had solar panels on their roof that could be in that range, or just a larger commercial property that had more. But I would have to check with our engineering folks to figure out what a typical 660 kilowatt project would look like.
Not a big deal, but so when we move that, or when the legislation moved that up to a 5 megawatt level, that was quite a substantial move from that original intent, if you will, under net metering. And so I would assume, for instance, if we move that level back during this process to say 1 megawatt, that would get us back to those smaller projects that might be a small business and or a large rooftop solar for say a large box store or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think one megawatt or under is going to capture most anything that includes sort of that behind the meter type usage. And that's what the original rules were all about. It's for people either on their home or their business wanted to have some generation there and then be able to, you know, to send a little bit to the grid and get credit for it. So that was really the nature of that original net metering program, to help facilitate people who wanted to put solar panels on their roof. And then this project was obviously much different, that when you start getting up into the higher numbers, that's really about separate generating facilities that people can subscribe to. So it's just a very different model. And it's really not net metering. It's certainly not in the traditional sense.
I would agree. Thank you.
And before we get off this, Phil, the level 3, that's really people who aren't putting anything on the grid. They're using it all themselves. They're not asking to sell it. Correct?
Right. That's right.
And
this would be like a mill owner.
And those projects, would they have a rate? Would they have an impact on ratepayers?
It might. It might have some impact by reducing the load, right? So if it's reducing your demand charges, then that might that is less revenue for the utility.
So it's a decline in revenue for the utility, and they have to spread their fixed costs over fewer ratepayers.
Yeah, but I think as was talked about earlier, it's the way that the classes are set up. At the residential level, there's a lot more of that distribution charge that's getting displaced sort of on a per megawatt basis.
Okay.
And if I may, so really that particular level 3 project wouldn't be any different than if for instance, at Eastern Maine Medical Center, when they put in the natural gas generation, or if Bath Iron Works wanted to put in a natural gas generator, that would really, it has the same end result, if you will, as far as other ratepayers on the grid goes, right?
I think so. I would need to go. I mean, I want to check my team in terms of the way that the demand charges are calculated. But yeah, presumably there would be some reduction in that charge. But I think it also depends on whether you're dealing with a pure transmission level customer or if you're at the sub-transmission level. So I think it's going to vary. It could vary depending on the particular customer involved. But we can certainly get more information on those level 3s for you.
Okay, thank you.
The next item, I think Representative Foster had asked about the cost of installed capacity. And I'm not sure if this fully answers the question you're getting at, but we did want to provide the information that we had, that the utilities have provided to us about the cost impacts of projects that are already operational. So they have broken down their projects by those that are operational, active, non-operational, and pending projects. And then they have indicated the capacity of those projects and the estimated cost impact. And so you can see that so far, these are largely very small projects that have been put in place. the larger ones. The 5 megawatts aren't coming online yet.
Can you hold
So,
on that screen and just zoom in
yep.
a little, zoom in twice so it expands it a little?
Sure.
Oh, that looks good. Yeah, I kind of want to see that grid.
Yep. So that's for CMP.
Okay, good.
And
Thank you.
then I can just, yeah, we also have the same thing for Versant.
So if I may, Commissioner, when the PUC halted the bids for the projects, I think the estimate was $190 million projected cost to the ratepayers for those. If I may be off on that, but it looks like between these two, and again, these are estimates for projects that are in the queue, I guess, that they expect. And it's basically, what, 214 million total per year, 162 for CMP and 52 for Versant. Does that number jive with what you folks saw coming ahead, which I guess would be additional to this, if those projects had been, if those bids had been accepted?
Are you talking about the DG procurement? Yeah,
Yes.
I don't know I don't remember the numbers offhand, but it would have been a huge price tag.
And it would have added on to this, although again, this
Right.
is a different
These are
category.
purely the net. Yeah, these are purely the net energy billing. So these are don't include any. I mean, some of these projects would have gone into that program probably instead of the MEB program. So I wouldn't say that it's totally added on. I think the projects could go into either program.
I see. Okay. Thank you.
And then finally, there's the question about the procurement update, and I think I had the number close. In the first round of the 3210G procurements, we procured just under 500 megawatts, and that leaves around 300 megawatts left in the second tranche. We're currently in the middle of doing that procurement. So I think those are the questions that I had taken down from the last meeting. Happy to follow up with any other information that you might need.
And this solar you're procuring, is it in-state solar or out-of-state solar?
I believe it's all in-state. I think in theory, I think out-of-state could be eligible. But the reality of that is because of the economic development component, in-state has a big advantage.
Okay. Good. So, and we had also asked to hear from Deb Hart on the COUs and their issues with net energy billing. And I think Deb Hart is in the attendees, if she could just be promoted. We can hear you, I think, Deb.
Oh, okay. Am I unmuted now?
Yep, you're unmuted.
Yeah, well, I think Senator Lawrence and Representative Foster, I think you heard this morning the concerns of the COUs. They have 100 megawatt limit right now, and they're hoping that that can be retained. They also are not subjected to multiple billing arrangements. You know, certainly something that they want to talk to you about more. I mean, I think they did a pretty good job this morning articulating what their concerns were. I think those were the two major highlights.
Okay. Yeah, I thought this morning was very good for us to understand. I don't sense any sentiment to change that 100 level.
Yeah.
But it's good for us to know kind of what the impact on them is.
Okay. Sorry.
Thank you, Ms. Hart, for being here. I also would add that I think it helped their concerns with that small level helps us to realize that on a larger level, that a lot of what we're talking about trying to deal with here, there are the same concerns on a grander scale, if you will. So I thought that was good to hear from them on that. And again, as Senator Lawrence said, I don't think we're even looking at changing that limitation. Although I will add, it was interesting, in the afternoon session, we heard from Mr. Buck from Tremont, who's heading up a Climate to Thrive. And he talked about his rooftop solar and how even below those levels, he's come to the realization that energy billing is going to, as there's more and more of even the small projects, become more detrimental to the entire effort to decarbonize, just because of that added cost that gets shifted, or not added, but the cost that gets shifted to other ratepayers. So I thought that was also interesting, coming from him unsolicited, if you will.
Right. And I had to go over to the tax committee, and I was sort of listening to two screens at the same time and didn't get to hear that. And you're all used to that too, but I realized that God gave me 2 ears apparently, so I could do 2 Zoom meetings. But I did want to thank you for your kindness towards them today, getting them to come out of their comfort zone and kind of appear before you. I think there was a little bit of angst, I mean, what exactly were you looking for? And I thought that they did a great job of explaining what their individual circumstances were.
Yeah, I thought it was very good and very, very interesting for me to understand their different structures, understand how they're trying to accommodate net energy billing and what it means for their ratepayers. So I thought it was very, very good.
Oh, good, thank you. And I did take notes on what you asked me, Senator Lawrence, and I will provide that information. At one point, I had a document that kind of outlined the various organizational things that the COU, how they're organized.
Yep.
I think it's a bit out of date, but I will recreate that. I'm not sure I can promise you, and it will be in a fancy Excel document, but I will get you something that you can work with.
Seems to me I remember one from 2 years ago.
Yeah, it's really kind of a little outdated. So, and because we're not in person right now, I think I provided some of that information to Deidre early on, just, the real rudimentary structure that they have and how many customers and that kind of stuff. But I definitely can do better and get something for you. So thank you for that question. We'll get it done.
Oh, you're welcome. And I think it helps us because we get so focused on, when we do these bills, of thinking of the IOUs and their large ratepayer base, that we sometimes lose track of thinking its impact on the COUs.
It does seem, though, from listening, that they listened to this morning. So
good.
They referred to the COUs a number of times in their presentation. So
good.
Yep.
Now, Dan, did you send us that document you had used in your presentation?
Yes, but probably within the hour.
Okay.
So it may have just gotten to your inbox. Okay.
I found the one from the PUC. I'll look for the one from you guys. Who would it have come from?
I think Melissa from my team would have sent it to either Deidre, but I think she may have tried to copy you all. But I know everyone is in email.
Yep, I've got it.
Overload. So
did you get it?
Okay.
Did you get it, Steve?
Yes, I just found it as well.
Yep, good.
You received a lot of stuff from multiple people who participated last time. I forwarded everything if it wasn't already forwarded to you.
Okay. I'm going to go
was the
through.
only one I couldn't find.
I work well off hard copies, so I'm going through and kind of printing these out so I have them in front of me. And so maybe I'll just talk with you, Deirdre, to make sure I've got everything here. So I don't know what you're thinking, Steve, but I think one of the first things, we got to do kind of two things simultaneously, but we got to figure out kind of what our goals are on solar, on the amount of solar we want spread over a period of time. And I don't know how you want to approach that, but that's one thing we got to do. And then the other thing is, when we begin to get this settled, I think I'd like to have maybe the GEO, the PUC, and the industry all talk about kind of how they would reshape things to meet those goals.
I would agree, Senator. Yeah, I am unmuted. Okay. I would agree. I think, you know, there are a few key points. One is how much do we want at what positions in the queue for net energy billing projects? And then how is that managed? And I would, obviously, I think any of this is going to be managed by the PUC, but
Yeah.
for example, I don't think we can really go by what the attrition rate is expected to be.
Yeah.
But I think we could say, this is how much we want. And if you are in the queue and the PUC is going to manage this project by project in some sort of a line, if you will, as well as being in, you know, in the queue, that if somebody falls out and they were a 10 megawatt project, then we're still 10 megawatts away from our goal. The next project would come up in line. Similar to what I mentioned with the school funding process, that you put your projects in, they're in a line, and you have to know that if you are in the back of the line, there's a good chance we may not get to you. I think that's one way to look at this as far as how many megawatts do we want, and then how do we manage that? And also that comes into deciding who do we safe harbor, how much do we safe harbor?
Yeah. Those are going to be critical questions. Dan and Phil, could you both come back on? So I'm just playing with numbers now because I can't think of, we've got to find a way to begin to narrow this down. So let's say we have 90 of solar right now on. And the graph you showed us, Dan, kind of suggested we need to get up to 760 by an increase of 760 by 2030. Is that correct?
That is what the RPS modeling showed for scenario analysis. Again, I want to be clear that that was just one plausible, you know, scenarios that came out of that.
Yeah, well, we're going to have to decide on a number someplace. So we have to use some kind of number to get there. And that's 760 in addition to the 90 that already exists, correct?
Yes.
And out of that 760, how much is going to come from net energy billing? How much is going to come from other procurements or grid scale?
The 760 is all, sorry, I'm going to shut my video off. I seem to be jumping around on my end. 760 is all distributed generation, distributed solar.
Okay.
There is another category for larger scale. That's the solar that's paired with storage in that report.
Okay. So assuming we agree upon that the 760 is there, that we really have 8 years to accomplish that in, we're talking about bringing approximately 100 megawatts on a year over the next 8 years. Am I off base, or what do you think, Phil?
That's really in line with the target. I think you're on the right track in terms of thinking of what's the goal we want to get to by 2030. And then the second decision is how much do you want to sort of grandfather in under the current rules, and to think about the time it's going to take to develop a new program. I think the smaller number that you grandfather, the faster you're going to want to get into a new program so that those projects can slide over. The larger the number you're grandfathering, then the more time you have. I think certainly if you were anywhere in the range of sort of grandfathering everything that already has an agreement, an NEB agreement, the reality is you may not need, that might get you everything. And so I think, to me, the big important question is, which goes back, I think, something you said early on in this process, which is how do we have the steady build? How do we want this growth to happen? Do we want to do it as a one-shot thing, or is it something that we want to spread out over time? And I think that's a key consideration for you all.
Yep. And I would bet we have at this point some of the attendees who want to weigh in on these thoughts, kind of how we're thinking of it. So Deirdre and Jordan, who do we have in as attendees who would like to weigh in on these ideas? Oops, sorry, Steve, go ahead.
So, yeah, if I may, Mr. Chair, just one other aspect of this I think we need to keep in mind, and that is one of the reasons that it has come up is the ratepayer cost. And in other words, we know, I think from questions that I've asked earlier, at least of Chair Bartlett, that we can get all of the grid scale non NEB solar that we ask for. And so we have to look at this and say, how much additional cost are we willing to accept to get the NEB solar as we go along? Because that's really what we're doing. We're saying we'll pay extra to get something we can already get for much less money as far as getting the solar capacity and the carbon reduction goes. So I think that has to be looked at as well as we pick that number, as well as maybe looking at how can we modify for the future net energy billing criteria so that maybe that it's still attractive, but it's not such a big hit on the other ratepayers. That's another thing. But those two items, I think, come under the category of how much are we willing to spend while we also decide on how big is the number. Thank you.
And I think there's other factors in there too, in addition to rate, that net energy billing adds some enhancement to the systems that grid scale does not. So we need to figure out a way to factor in that benefit that the ratepayers are paying for, and kind of how we want to do that. Because if we did all grid scale, we're not going to get those benefits that net energy billing brings in. So, okay, do we have attendees who are interested in weighing in?
We are showing Caitlin Kelly O'Neill and Jeremy Payne with their hand raised right now.
Okay.
So if you want me to move them over, and Steve
Why don't you
Hudson.
let the three of them in?
Okay. Oh,
There's
probably
Caitlin
Jordan and I are
there.
probably doing the same thing at the same time.
I'm not touching anything because I don't want to kick people out inadvertently.
Hi, Caitlin. And I see Jeremy and I see David. So at this point, do you guys want to weigh in? I'll go to you, Caitlin, first, or Jeremy, I'll go to you first.
Sure.
No, Caitlin, go right ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sure Jeremy will just build off of some thoughts I have on the discussion. So I think I absolutely understand, the concerns about how much is being built, how much is coming online, cost impacts. I think first I would like to reiterate that, the analysis performed by Daymark, does show that cost impacts are not as severe as the original PUC report suggested. So, that is, I think that's a very important point to keep in mind. And secondly, that, the NEB program, it was designed to be a distributed generation program, because distributed generation provides additional benefits beyond just getting solar megawatts built, which obviously that's a good goal to have as a baseline. And we absolutely can get value from utility scale, but DG does, it provides additional consumer choice. The customers that are entering into NEB contracts are receiving real savings and benefits, and that does provide a significant value. So I think I would just urge the committee, as we're entering into a discussion, I think this idea of measuring out the rate of build, I truly think that's something that can absolutely be incorporated into discussions for a future program. But right now, I mean, the program as designed by LD 1711 didn't have those aspects incorporated into it. And so the market responded. There are natural factors within the market that will slow this rate of build down, outside of any other annual, like something such as an annual megawatt target build. In particular, and most importantly, the ongoing interconnection studies. Many of these projects that are being grouped together in cluster studies, they may not end up being built for another 3-4 years anyways, without any other additional slowdown of the rate of build. So I think I would encourage the conversation around safe harbor, instead of thinking of it of here's how many megawatts we can let in. I really would encourage it of honoring any of the agreements that have been built. If there are further conversations about future milestones, again, just anything that is firmly within a developer's direct control, as opposed to anything that might be outside of their control. So Jeremy, I don't know if you have anything else you want to.
Caitlin, before I go on to Jeremy, do you have
Yeah.
ways to quantify the value added to the system of distributive generation?
So I think that was the intent of the Daymark study, was to quantify the value, and the value added to the system, and to the main economy by the interconnection of these projects. And there have been other studies that have been done, but that's that certainly was the intent for the purpose of that study.
Yep. Okay, because that's one factor we can put in here, is quantifying that in our process.
Absolutely.
Jeremy?
Thanks, Senator. I did just want to touch upon the point that Representative Foster made the other day, and then again just a few minutes ago, comparing the solar build out to the school funding formula. That's really not an apples to apples comparison in any way. Schools haven't really spent money in response to a signal that the legislature sent. And we have developers who have spent literally millions of dollars in anticipation of this program being available so that they could build their projects, provide the value to their off-takers or subscribers. None of that happens in the school funding formula process. The school board meets, they pay an engineer to look at the cost of asbestos removal or whatever it is in their school, and they decide, okay, we either make the reinvestment in the existing school or we build a new building. This is completely different. So I just want to be careful about acting as though developers haven't spent money, because they really have. And then just to maybe expand on one point that Caitlin made, the process that occurs with the utility reviewing, interconnecting, and ultimately constructing the upgrades necessary to interconnect these projects is literally going to be a year-long process. So there are really natural slowdowns that occur throughout this process, as I think we've heard from Mr. Steniford, from Mr. Norman at Versant Power. There are natural caps within their systems that are going to occur, which is why we're suddenly seeing a whole bunch of large cluster studies of small distributed generation projects. So anybody who thinks that we're going to have 2,000 megawatts of DG solar online in 6 months is misinformed. And I'm not suggesting anybody here has said that. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page here. This is going to be what we have now is going to be a very slow plotting process. Just two other points is just the really damaging signal we would be sending to the marketplace if we tell, the whatever it is, 1,200 megawatts that have NEB agreements in place right now, that we're going to basically just arbitrarily pick a number and say, you're not in. We've decided that's too much. We've decided as a state that despite the fact we told you 2 years ago to come here and spend money in anticipation and response to the signal we sent you, we're now going to change the rules. And so what that does is not just harm the existing pipeline of development, that establishes a harmful reputation for the state going forward. So I just want to be very clear. We should not make any presumption that projects will be here, that companies will wait. They won't. I don't think any of us would. You know, if you entered into an agreement to buy a home, signed a purchase and sale agreement, and then 3 months later somebody said, you know, we've decided you're going to need to buy that home 18 months from now. You wouldn't go back and buy that home a second time. You would go buy a home in a different community, a different county, or more likely a different state. I think that is a very realistic outcome. The last thing I just wanted to say is if you really need to think about setting a specific number of megawatts each year, and Senator, I've heard you say that, I think that makes good sense. Doing that prospectively is completely rational. That does not harm the state's reputation. It does not stand in the way of the investment dollars that have been spent, because you're sending a signal to the marketplace. There's going to be an off-ramp for NEB 1.0, and we're going to transition to NEB 2.0. But you give them that informed opportunity to make investment decisions. What we're doing, or what you're all seemingly talking about now, is short-circuiting that entire process and not giving them any opportunity to make an informed investment choice. They already made those investment decisions in response to LD 1711 becoming law. So I just want to be really clear. This is going to be very problematic, and I would argue maybe not quite as terrible as sort of the Statoil situation, but pretty darn close to a Statoil 2.0 situation if we start undoing agreements and sending a signal to the marketplace that, you know what, we're pretty sure that you'll stay here. We've already seen that that isn't how this plays out. So anyway, I'll pause there.
So, and I understand that argument completely, Jeremy. My concern is that if we have so much in the pipeline right now, because we couldn't predict how much there is, if it has a detrimental impact on rates, then you're going to have a public policy backlash that would also have an equally negative, harmful effect on the industry, on the state of Maine, and on solar in general. So from a public
I think that's
standpoint, we have to find a way to manage this now that we know what has happened.
Yeah, I think that's fair, Senator. I would just push back. I don't want us to continue looking at the Public Utilities Commission's cost reports. And no disrespect to Chair Bartlett, who I respect greatly. You know, hopefully at this point, the committee has realized that the commission's report was pretty narrow, pretty superficial. The Daymark report actually quantified the various benefits that exist, the actual financial economic values that these projects deliver to Maine. The commission has acknowledged that their report didn't do that, and that's okay. But that's why I want to be really careful about continuing to circle back to that PUC report, as I think Representative Foster was doing, where we talk about, you know, the perceived costs are, I think Representative Foster said something like north of $200 million. First of all, we disagree with those numbers completely. But second of all, that is a presumption that every single megawatt that's in the queue is getting built. There's nobody who believes that's the case. Not even every megawatt that has an NEB agreement is going to be built. You know, I think you absolutely have to make some sort of assumption around an attrition rate. I totally agree with what Dan said earlier. There's no hard and fast rule that it's 33% or 61%. But to just say we're not going to pick one at all, and we're just going to assume that every single megawatt that has an NEB agreement is built, it's just false. It's just not going to happen. There are so many variables that interrupt the potential reality of those projects becoming operational. I just think you wouldn't be making as informed a policy choice as you can if you don't assume some level of attrition.
Those are all valid points, I think. Very valid points. The trouble is we have no way of knowing this process until we go through it and dig through some of these numbers and some of these details. Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just would point out there's one thing that hasn't come up in any of these conversations that is in the back of my mind, and that is not only from the PUC, but from others. We have heard that every time we pass a bill, every time something occurs where that we raise the rate for the ratepayers of Maine, we make it more difficult to get people to convert over to electric from petroleum driven equipment or heating or whatever. And that's come from Mr. Stoddard from Efficiency Maine and others. So there is that aspect to this, that the higher we can tell the ratepayers, you got to pay for this, it's a great thing. But guess what? It's going to slow down other efforts that at least some believe are extremely important that we keep moving ahead. So that's one aspect we haven't mentioned here that I thought I'd bring up.
Okay, I see a number of people who want to chip in. Tony Buxton, I think, is on and wants to chip in.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Senator. Representative, thank you very much for the thought and hard work you're putting into this. And thank you also to the Commission and to the Governor's Energy Office. On behalf of Industrial Energy Consumer Group, I want to offer a few thoughts. We have filed a document today offering some thoughts and what we hope are some constructive suggestions. You've been mentioning ratepayers, and that's absolutely correct to consider that factor. We represent facilities where 1/4 cent a kilowatt hour in electricity costs can cost us a big contract and put people out of work. And obviously, you know that. And so when we're looking at rate increases of 10, 15, or 20%, it gets pretty scary. And I do want to convey the very strong concern of some of the large manufacturing facilities in Maine that the kind of rate increases we're looking at here are extremely dangerous. And whether they are necessary or not, and we contend they are not, we're in a circumstance where the program is partially underway, and we appreciate the problems that creates. And so, for example, we have said in our filing today, we would think it would be reasonable to allow either over time or some other way the 100 megawatts of existing projects and another 400 over time, so you can fulfill the real intent that we believe you had in enacting distributed generation legislation. I note that if there were 2,500 megawatts of NEB capacity to be built, that eventually the rate increase would be 51% for the state of Maine. And that just is, as you pointed out, Senator, a recipe for an end to renewable energy policies that we need to get to zero carbon. I also want to talk about attrition for a moment. Our firm does work with distributed generation and renewable energy all over the United States. And it is easy to believe that a project that's going to be expensive or that you may not need won't get built. Right now in Maine, a lot of the small developers, not a lot, some, I don't know what percentage, are being purchased by large hedge funds or by the affiliates of large hedge funds. Carlyle Group is here buying. BlackRock has recently purchased Bob Cleave's operation, I believe, and so on. And what that means is that if there's any way on God's green earth that those projects can be built, the capital will be there to build them. And so counting on a 20, 30, 40% attrition rate would be, pick your metaphor, whistling by the graveyard. You shouldn't assume, that's obviously illogical, that every one of them is going to get built. And there are indeed interconnection problems. But when you're dealing with 1,000 megawatts or less, it is clearly likely that 1,000 megawatts or more will get built because the price is so high. A couple of the positive thoughts that we've had were Rich Silkman has filed a document at the PUC that you may be aware of in the ongoing proceeding, proposing a sort of suspense account that would delay payment over a period of time, effectively using the utilities, the two utilities' borrowing power. The utilities obviously don't like that, but that's what they're there for in part, and we've done it before. And that might have the effect of phasing some of this over time. There is a cost to that. It is the cost of debt, but nonetheless, that's a possibility. The other thing that we have talked about is having the commission and the utilities have the ability to negotiate buyouts of contracts. For example, the way that would work, let's say if you decided on a cap of 500 megawatts, you would offer the ability of one of those 500 megawatt projects, one of those projects in the 500 megawatts, pardon me, to be bought out after negotiations with the utility and the commission. Now, the way that would work.
Tony, if I could just, we're
Yeah.
trying to get through this by 5.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm
So,
sorry.
and I don't want to get into a whole debate between NEB and the industry and all
Right.
that. I
And
kind of
that's
want to get us to where we begin working on how
good.
we keep NEB going and with reducing the impact on rates as much as possible because of the volume that's come in. So we have to find a way to manage this in such a way that we have a net energy billing program that works.
Great.
So, and I understand everybody comes from different positions. Nobody wants to give in, but somehow we're, as a legislature, going to have to find a way to make this work successfully for the state of Maine.
And
So
I just wanted to be clear. I just wanted to be clear, Senator, if I may, that we are proposing giving in.
Yep.
Okay.
So I heard the 2 proposals in your thing. So I'll go back to Caitlin and then on to Eric from CMP.
Thank you, Senator. So I really just wanted to restate a couple positions, in this discussion about, I think first about reasonable expectations of companies coming to Maine. And up until the law is changed, any company that has a signed NEB agreement has a reasonable expectation that agreement will be honored. So I think that's important to highlight. And I don't want it to be lost. I know there is concern about rate impacts. I hope that the DAMARC analysis and the DAMARC report helps to alleviate some of those concerns, first by showing not only that the cost impact will be lower than expected, but also that there are significant benefits. And as much as, I think we also share the concern that there isn't an overly burdensome impact on ratepayers that might impact, the continued adoption of electrification and beneficial electrification in Maine. But it also, it can't be discounted how the way that the program is designed, and the way that the benefits can be passed on to customers. We're now seeing municipalities, we're seeing companies, we're seeing individual residents seeing savings on their bills as a result of, going solar themselves or entering into a community solar project. So I frankly just wanted to make sure those points weren't lost in the discussion.
And they're not lost. We understand both sides of the debate, and we don't need to keep going over each side of the debate. I think we got to kind of move forward and see if we can find some kind of agreement on how we go forward. David, you wanted to, sorry, Eric, and then David.
Thank you, Senator. I won't repeat most of what you've already heard. I think reality is somewhere between Jeremy's perspective and Tony's with respect to attrition. I think it is unrealistic to think that everything will be built that is currently in our interconnection queue. There are going to be some natural barriers that emerge through the interconnection process that are just going to make it cost prohibitive. And I also agree that with the sanctity of contracts and the sanctity of legislation and state policy, not changing the rules of the game midstream on folks who've invested millions of dollars, that's a position we fully support. However, there are rate impacts that have to be considered. And as Chairman Bartlett pointed out in our last discussion, there are ways to mitigate the impact on non-participating customers, at least with respect to the kilowatt hour netting, through appropriate changes in rate design. And I think that is something that we seriously need to consider going forward. That's not something that your committee needs to deal with necessarily. I think that is certainly within the power of the commission to address that issue, and I hope that they do. What I really wanted to do, Senator, was to make sure that you and Representative Foster and other members of the subcommittee were aware we did have a homework assignment from our last discussion. We did provide you some data that provides more granularity on what is in our interconnection queue and how far each each project is in getting their way through that process. And if you have any questions on that, I'd be happy to walk you through it, either now or in a later time.
Great. Who did that email come from?
It went to Deirdre. Deirdre, I assume, forwarded it on to you from there.
Okay.
It came from
I have
Deirdre.
forwarded it. I'll
Good.
gather everything together in one document and send it to you.
Yeah, we have, we get hundreds and hundreds of emails a day. So it's difficult for us to go back and find the reports we want to get. So, but I appreciate that. And I hope you, CMP, Versant, and the COUs, but more CMP and Versant, because you're more, COUs have that limit. I hope you will continue to help us try to refine data. I realize for you, you don't have an iron in the fire either way, but getting to understand the data is very important for us. So I appreciate that, Eric. David? David, can you hear me?
I'm trying to, thank you, Senator. I'll keep it very brief. Just to say, and this is not a surprise, I share concerns, the similar concerns that Jeremy and Caitlin have raised. I would just mention that we've scheduled a couple of meetings over the next 2 days with some other environmental organizations and advocates to just take a look at a lot of the information that's been provided. So we might want to weigh in a bit more soon based on some of the discussions we've had. But again, I do think it's important to and you've said this yourself, a diverse portfolio, one that certainly includes benefits for the communities as well as the jobs benefits, which, at least looking at some of the reports I've seen, are likely to be double the economic benefits, the revenue benefits to local jurisdictions of distributed generation, which of course was part of the reason for 1711. I think those are the kinds of things we'll want to address. And I know this hasn't come up, and maybe this is for 2.0, but as Dan Burgess brought up, the environmental levers in the DG procurement, to the extent that citing those kinds of things are addressed at some point, I think are important, certainly would be important to the environmental community. I know Representative Berry brought it up this morning as it related to agricultural lands, those kinds of things.
Yep.
But that's all I would add at this point.
Okay, Representative Foster, did you have anything to add at this point?
No, I think I'm good.
So what I would suggest is we've now gotten the information back we requested from the last meeting, that we have some opportunity for Steve, for Seth, for I, and for Trey to begin to absorb that information and begin to just see kind of where we're at and go through it. And that we get back together probably either on Friday or perhaps next week, early next week, to continue this discussion. This is going to be a discussion that we both have to have expeditiously, but also in great detail. And it's not going to be an easy discussion to kind of go through all this, but we have to do it as expeditiously as we can. Any other thoughts? Is there anybody in the attendees Jordan, who I have missed, who wants to add something in?
There's not currently anyone with their hand up.
Okay, great. So let's conclude this meeting. And I think Deirdre, I'll work with Deirdre and Steve or Trey to schedule another meeting. And then when we can have a chance to absorb what the reports that were given back to us. I do want to suggest everybody reflect back on the Daymark report because we need to find a way to quantify what's in the Daymark report and kind of reconcile it with what's in the PUC report and determine kind of where we are on the benefits to the state of Maine. Okay, great. We'll see you all later, and you'll get notice of our next meeting.